If you're an interstate carrier, IFTA is not a tax you should miss for any reason. Hi, I'm Joy, your compliance guide. I work with Dow Transportation and Dispatch. This is our YouTube channel where we talk about everything compliance, trucking compliance. We explain compliance and make it really easy for you to understand, right? So if you're coming across this channel for the very first time, do well to click on the subscribe button as you'll be getting more videos on compliance. So today I'll be talking about IFTA, IFTA, the International Fuel Tax Agreement. I'll be explaining what IFTA is, and then I'll also be sharing my screen with you, showing you how to file IFTA, showing you how to calculate your miles, and of course how to calculate your fuel purchased. So I'm going to be breaking down IFTA according to quarters. Like I mentioned earlier, IFTA is a fuel tax that you have to file if you travel interstate. Now, what's the importance of this tax? If you travel from one state to the other, probably your base jurisdiction is New York, and you operate in New Jersey, you operate in Maine, you operate in Massachusetts, you have to pay those states for using their roads. And one of the ways you do that to ensure that each state you travel through gets compensation for their road you use is through a fuel tax, right? So you pay the tax to your states, your operating states, and then the state you're operating will share the tax to the different states you travel through in the quarter. That's why it is important you report, because when you report your mileage for that particular quarter, you give your state the idea of where you travel through for that quarter. So if in a quarter you travel through 5 states, you went to Massachusetts, you went to PA, you went to Delaware, you went to ME and other, probably New Jersey, and you operate in New York as your jurisdiction state, you need to file those tax so that New York will be aware that in this quarter you travel through the states, and when you pay your tax, they distribute that tax evenly amongst those states, right? So IFTA is filed every quarter. As long as you have the IFTA license, which of course every interstate carrier must have, you have to report every quarter, and each quarter has 3 months. So we have the first quarter, we have January to March, and then the deadline for the filing for the first quarter is April 30th. So usually you get a 1 month grace period to file. So if a quarter is ending in March, you don't get penalties until the 30th of April. So you are given an entire 1 month for you to do that. So the first quarter we have January to March, and then we have our deadline April 30th. And the second quarter we have April to June, and we have our deadline July 31st. We have the third quarter July to September, and the deadline October 31st. And the last quarter, which is October to December, the deadline is January 31st. So it runs like that every year. One of the things I would always advise carriers to do is to set a checklist, set a timer for it, because especially when you don't have an organized compliance team, because sometimes most carriers, they get caught up in operation in driving and all of that they forget to file their tax. So if you have a checklist for all of the filings you have to do, what you just have to do is once that period, you get to that period, you file the tax. So every end of March, you're expected to file for the first quarter, or if your records are not ready, you're expected to file on or before 30th of April. Same thing for the other quarter. So once you get this, and this is just a breakdown on every quarter for IFTA filing. So how do we calculate this IFTA? What data do you need to calculate IFTA? You would need the total miles traveled for that entire quarter. So you are gathering your miles traveled from January to March, for example. That's an entire 3 months for each state you travel through. You also need the total fuel you purchase for that period, which is 3 months as well. So let's say we have our states, we have miles, we have fuel purchased. You have to note that what we use to calculate IFTA is fuel purchase, not fuel use, which means that you have to keep record of all your fuel receipts. Every time you purchase fuel, you keep record of it. If the receipts seem too much, what you could do possibly is to calculate your total fuel purchase every month, so that in case you want to throw the receipts away or you want to delete the soft copy of the receipt, you can do that. So for January, calculate all the fuel you purchased in each state and do the same thing for February, do the same thing for March, or if you are in this quarter, do the same thing for July, do the same thing for August, do the same thing for September. So you need the miles traveled for that quarter, you need the fuel purchase for that quarter. Now I have my data here, and in New York we traveled 6,600 miles for 3 months. This is the data I'm using, July to September data. So for 3 months, we traveled 6,600 miles in New York, and we purchased 1,041 gallons of fuel in New York. In New Jersey, we used 6,000. We traveled 6,617 miles, and we purchased 1,464 gallons. In City, Connecticut, we traveled 4,060 miles, and we purchased 508 gallons of fuel. PA, we traveled 641 miles, 385 gallons of fuel. RI, we traveled 215 miles, we purchased 90 gallons of fuel. And for MA, Massachusetts, we traveled 1,790 miles, 507 gallons of fuel. So basically, this is the data you need for your calculations, because you have to pay for traveling these miles in New Jersey. Let's say your base jurisdiction is New York, you have to pay New Jersey for traveling this mile in their using their roads. You have to pay Connecticut for traveling this mile using their road. So you calculate that with your fuel purchase. Now I'm going to share my screen, and then you see how I file my reports. I'm using New York as a base jurisdiction, so I'm filing with the Department of Taxation and Finance, New York. I'm sure other states have theirs, but you have to file with your base jurisdiction. So if you're operating in West Virginia, if that's your registered state, you file with the Department of Taxation and Finance, West Virginia. If you're operating in Massachusetts, you do the same thing. You just have to know your state's website for filing. Once you get all of this ready, you get your state's website for filing, you have to make sure as well that you have your IFTA license, because if you don't have an IFTA license, you won't have an account registered for IFTA. So you have to make sure you have an IFTA license. Once you have your IFTA license, then you can look for it. And for carriers who have more than one trucks, you probably be wondering, do I have to file for each of my trucks? If I have 5 trucks, do I have to report for one and then report for the other? Now for IFTA, you use just one data. So IFTA report is in fleet. It's assumed that you are reporting for your fleet, right? So you can decide to add up all the miles traveled with the by all of the trucks, or you can decide to just report for one. But however you decide to do it, you just need to file one report, and it represents your fleet. For those who operate in New York who file HUT, for every truck you have, each truck needs to have an HUT, the certificate for HUT, right? So if that truck has HUT certificate, you file for each truck. So when you log on to the website, you see your certificates for each of the trucks. You file for it separately. But for IFTA, one data covers up for your entire fleet.
Okay, yeah, so this is it. This is for New York. You go to tax.ny.gov, and then you go to the online service. So I am already logged in here. You can see the name of my company. Then you go to services, other taxes. There you have your IFTA. You also have your HUT for New Yorkers. So this is it. You select the quarter you are filing for. Very important, because the system needs to know what you're filing for. So we are filing for the 3rd quarter. We're going to select that July to September, and the year we're filing for 2025. Did you operate in any jurisdiction for this filing period? Yes. Are you filing for one or more fuel types? No, because we're just filing for diesel, right? So, are you canceling your IFTA license? We are not canceling after this filing. So you just have to make sure that you check the right things. So after you check, you continue, and then it brings you to this. This is the information we have filed. So we go to fuel type. Of course, we are filing for just one fuel type. We go to fuel type. We're filing for diesel, right? So we put it there. Diesel is what we are filing for. And then you go to, once you've imputed your diesel, I'm just trying to check to ensure that I'm not missing out any information. You click on that diesel, then it brings you to where you impute your miles, your IFTA miles for the entire quarter. So you're reporting for the diesel that you purchased. Yeah, we have to go back to check and see that we have the right information here. Go back again to the fuel type. Yeah, go back again to the fuel type diesel and we cross check. It's one thing I like to do, to check back every single thing I put in, check back, because unlike HUT, IFTA, if you make a mistake, you have to submit a few documents to correct it. So I have to check. So we impute our total IFTA miles for the quarter, that's July to September, 3 months. For this quarter, our total IFTA miles is 20,166 miles. We don't have non-IFTA miles because everywhere we travel to are IFTA states. And then the total gallons of fuel purchased, 4,292. Remember, you are filing for fuel purchased because you are paying fuel tax, so it has to be for fuel purchase. Yeah, so after that we have so it's loaded. So you can see fuel type diesel, total miles, total gallons. Do you have any tax paid gallons to report? Of course we do, that's why we are filing. And so this is your jurisdiction summary. Yeah, that's your jurisdiction summary where you now report for each state. So you could see here, why after you put in the total diesel, you have to file the report for each state you travel through, because of course they have to get compensation for your fuel, right? So we have the first, Connecticut. Yeah, so we have CT. We're going to put in our miles for that, and it's 4,060 miles. Taxable miles. Your total miles, IFTA miles, is the same thing as your taxable miles. Then you put your gallons. You can see miles per gallon is $4.70. That is the tax rate that is removed from each gallon of fuel you purchase, each gallon of diesel, $4.70. So you can see that at the end of the day, what is automatically calculated is the balance you owe that state, right? So we are in the next jurisdiction, Massachusetts. We have to fill in the miles we traveled, 1,790 miles, which is also the same thing as taxable miles. Then we fill in our total gallons. Right, so you have to do this for every jurisdiction you travel through. Yeah, so we have to go to the jurisdiction summary because the states listed out there, I have filled in for all of them. You can see the warning signs. It's trying to tell me that my total miles I imputed is not the same thing with the miles. That's because I have not added the other states. I just filled in with the states I met there. So I have to add the states I traveled through. Right, so the platform is so unique that it corrects every mistake you make. You cannot go to the next until you have corrected the previous mistake. Right, so we have to add jurisdiction so that it can rhyme with the total miles we initially filled in. So we have CTMA, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, PA. We traveled through Delaware as well. So we are adding that, and we are adding that. So we put in the miles we traveled for DE. So you can see it's added already. We put in the miles. You do the same thing for other states. So yeah, DE is added. We also traveled to, it's still not rhyming yet. So yeah, we went to Rhode Island. So we impute the miles we traveled through for that as well. Yeah, so you can see it is showing RI. We put in the miles so that the miles report for each state can rhyme with the total miles we have here. So yeah, we are adding DE. So we've added that, right, and it will calculate. So you can see that at the end of the day, the tax auto-calculates itself. You don't have to bother about calculating your tax by yourself. The system is already designed in a way that once you impute your miles traveled and the fuel purchase, it just calculates your tax for you. And then there is also a fuel tax paid for each gallon of fuel you purchase. So you can see that our IFTA for the quarter is just $6 39 cents. Is that 39? $6.89. That's because our driver had already paid $4.70 for each gallon of fuel purchased. So what we are doing is that we are balancing IFTA. We are balancing up for this tax. So once you calculate, you get to the place where you're supposed to make payment. So you can see that. So you calculate, and then you get to a place where you're supposed to make payments. You use your void check, or you could decide to mail to them, right? So this.
Yeah, so I'm sure that you were able to pick one or two lessons from the screen I just shared. For those wondering how you get your mileage data, you do that from your ELD. If you have an electronic logging device, after every trip, you are expected to download your miles for that day, or if you want to do it weekly, you want to do it monthly. But for those who have ELDs, you have you just download your mileage and then you automatically fill it out. That even makes it easier. For those who do not have ELDs, you use your load sheet, your RCs, you use your BOL, something that represents your load for that day, for that week, for that month. So if you don't have an ELD and you have load sheet, you use your load sheet, you calculate the miles you traveled for each load. Just that is going to be a lot of work, a lot of stress, but not having an ELD is not an excuse for not filing IFTA, because you're not going to make that excuse to the Department of Taxation and Finance that you don't have an ELD, that's why you did not file your IFTA. So what you could do is use your load sheet, calculate it manually, and then get miles for each state you traveled. And just in case your truck was in a bad condition for a particular quarter, it still does not mean that you would not file your IFTA. We also do zero mileage report for IFTA, right? So what it means is that if you do not operate for a particular quarter, you still have to report anyway, but all you report zero mileage. So for all the states, you just impute 000. For fuel purchase, you impute 00, and then it automatically calculates. You would not have any tax to pay, but you reported. It will be on record that you reported your mileage for that quarter. And then also for those who would be wondering why IFTA taxes are quite little, because from my screen record you could see that my tax for the quarter is just about $6. I'm sure that from the screen record explanation, you're able to get the fact that for every fuel you purchase, for every gallon of fuel you purchase, there is a tax rate that is removed for it. So what you are paying at the end of the quarter is whatever balance is remaining from the tax rate you're not able to meet up with, right? So that is that for your IFTA filing. Like I said earlier, I am your compliance guide and I handle anything compliance. If you're so busy that you don't have the time to file your taxes, you could reach out to me. You could also book a one-on-one session with us. We get to explain to you what all of these taxes are about. We get to explain to you what trucking compliance is about. Right, so this is October and it's right about time for you to file your IFTA for the third quarter, which is July to September. The deadline is usually 31st of October, so you still have like 2 or 3 weeks to do that if you haven't filed that. If you need help with that, you could always reach out to us. Do well to subscribe to this YouTube channel to see more videos like this. Thank you. See you in the next video.